Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining to this sub-regional dialogue on advancing gender equality, a review of the Beijing +30 in the Caribbean. We're very happy to have this meeting today in order to exchange and comments and informations related to the Beijing +30 process. And this is a meeting that we really want to have in order to ensure that Caribbean perspectives and dialogue are promoted at the region, and that with different stakeholders can have this space to engage in the Beijing +30 process, and particularly in the next CSW. As you may know, the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which will be held at the UN headquarters from the 10th to 21st of March, will focus on the review and appraisal of the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the outcomes of the 23rd special session of the General Assembly. So we would like to proceed with the inauguration of this meeting. First of all, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Diane Quarles. She's the director of the ECLAC Subregional headquarters from the Caribbean in Porto, Spain. So Diane, please, you have the floor.
Good morning, colleagues. Oh, it's just wonderful to be here with you. And thank you so much to Stick for fixing the problem. It is such a pleasure. I see Maria Noel, I see Terry, I see Nana Oe. Anna, it's such a pleasure to be here with all the colleagues, representatives of government, of civil society, of our UN system. I saw Isua, yes, and the directors of gender machineries. It's wonderful to be here with you all this morning. I'm so very pleased to join Nicole in welcoming you to this dialogue on advancing gender equality in the Caribbean. It is a sub-regional, as she said, it is intended as a sub-regional exchange that we have organized expressly for the Caribbean, coming on the heels of the meeting of the presiding officers of the Regional Conference on Women in Latin America and the Caribbean that was held in Santiago, Chile late last year, and strategically also being scheduled ahead of the 69th session of the CSW next month. As you're all aware, CSW 69 will serve as the 30-year review of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And so the primary goal of our meeting this morning is to provide a space to deliberate on the Caribbean journey thus far in meeting the objectives of Beijing and advancing its action towards gender equality. It was about 5.5 years ago that we gathered in Porto, Spain, for a similar exercise. Then it was for the sub-regional review of Beijing at 25. And since then, the women of our sub-region have been disproportionately impacted by many significant events. At the global level, it was COVID-19 that brought our tourism-dependent economies almost to a standstill. And employment in the tourism sector in the Caribbean is predominantly female. At the regional level, we face devastation from natural disasters like Hurricane Beryl last year and the Le Soufriere volcano eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that impacted several and neighboring islands, events that demanded special accommodation for women and girls. And at the national level, many of our member states continue to grapple with the increasing trend of violence against women and girls. And these are the circumstances that have impacted our sub-region's women in ways that have significant implications for sub-regional progress, where the Beijing platform is concerned. Last year, as part of the 30-year regional review of the Beijing Declaration and Platform, a number of the member states in our sub-region undertook their national review of Beijing. And those national reports, which were submitted, were used to inform the Commission's report on the region's progress towards implementation of Beijing at 30. And my colleague, Ana Guespas Garcia, director of the ECLAC Division for Gender Affairs, during our meeting this morning, will share with you the common themes and messages that have been distilled from the national reports that we received from the subregion. Her presentation will be complemented and further enriched by contributions from you, some of the representatives of member states that submitted those national reports. And this information sharing is intended to sensitize all of you to those actions on which the Caribbean is performing well, to raise awareness on those for which the subregion is lagging or may need some scaling up with renewed effort. At ECLAC, our research continues to show that Caribbean women and girls are at a disadvantage in the labor market, even when our women are more educated and when our girls consistently outperformed boys in school. Furthermore, we have found that women continue to carry a disproportionate share of unpaid household work, especially that relating to care work. And these have challenging implications for economic autonomy of women in the Caribbean. Furthermore, in recent years, particularly during the COVID period and beyond, media reports have shown a heightened incidence of gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence. This trend, if not reversed, will seriously impact women's physical and psychosocial well-being, not to mention their decision-making autonomy. So these are some of the critical measures of progress charted by the Regional Gender Agenda, which contribute to advancing gender equality in the Caribbean. There is no question that the Beijing Plus 30 review represents a significant milestone in the global campaign to achieve gender equality. And with CSW 69 less than 3 weeks away, there is no better time for the Caribbean and small island developing states to pursue introspection on how gender equality has advanced 30 years in the subregion and how best to address the challenges that continue to undermine our efforts to promote this vital platform. So this then is our essential objective in arranging this dialogue today. On the eve of the Beijing Plus 30 review, it was important to facilitate this introspection among you all, whether as decision makers, practitioners, experts, stakeholders, so to promote a greater clarity and common perception and perspective on the landscape for priority action in the Caribbean in respect of Beijing. I therefore encourage you all to readily share your views, your experiences, your success stories, your best practice at the national level, anything that could help to advance gender equality and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for action in the wider Latin American and Caribbean region. Again, let me welcome you to this sub-regional meeting. I thank you for taking the time to participate. I look forward to engaging with all of you, and I look forward to the rich contributions that you all will make to our shared dialogue this morning. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Diane. We're really happy to have you here in this meeting. And now I'm pleased to give the floor to Isiwa Iayen, office in charge of the UN Women Multi-Country Office, Caribbean, to make her intervention also in the opening. Thank you very much. Isiwa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm experiencing the same problem that Diane experienced, so I don't know if you want me to wait until your colleagues assist with the camera.
If you can click on the 3 buttons to see if it's possible to open your camera, they tell me that it's available for you to.
No, when I click the 3 buttons, I'm seeing several options, but I'm not seeing anything related to the camera. So I don't know what Diane was able to do, but I'm experiencing the same problem that she had. Now you're seeing me, so I think I look far away, but just pretend I'm close to you. So All right. I also want to ask if my colleague Sharon Carter-Burke, she's been waiting in the waiting room. She's our communications officer, if she can be allowed into the meeting. Yes? Okay. Welcome, everyone. I want to join Diane in welcoming you to this very important dialogue. Honorable Ministers of Government, Permanent Secretaries, Directors of Gender Affairs Bureaus, senior officials from the CARICOM Secretariat, as well as Dr. Anna Guesnes, Director of Gender Affairs of ECLAC, Diane Quarles, Head of the Subregional Office of ECLAC, members of the Diplomatic Corps, other UN agencies and other development partners present. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which was adopted in 1995, remains one of the most significant global commitments to advancing gender equality and women's rights. And we all here know this. We're here to commemorate this particularly important event and also action, plan of action that really allows us to be able to ensure that member states are monitoring the commitments they have made to gender equality and women's rights. And member states pledged to accelerate efforts to address 12 critical areas of concern. They pledged to address poverty. They pledged to address education and training, health, violence, armed conflict, the economy, power and decision-making, institutional mechanisms, human rights, media, the environment, and the girl child. 3 decades later, though, despite notable progress, no country has fully achieved gender equality. And on the 30th anniversary of Beijing, this presents a pivotal opportunity to engage with you, but also to engage with the new generation of gender equality advocates and key stakeholders to foster a collaborative and whole of government and whole of society approach. And this effort ensures that no one should be left behind, and we have to eradicate the root causes of gender inequality in order to pave the way for substantive equality to be achieved. Now, Caribbean countries have made significant commitments to women's rights. All have ratified CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and further 5, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, Belize, and others have ratified the Convention's optional protocol. The Inter-American Human Rights System also includes a powerful regional instrument to combat violence against women, that's the Belém do Pará Convention. And in line with international agreements and the Beijing Platform for Action, and through years of dedicated and strident advocacy by the feminist movement and women's movement, several countries have acted to advance gender equality by amending constitutions, by creating gender affairs ministries or institutes, by reforming civil codes, by penalizing gender-based violence, and by enacting gender-based quotas for political offices as a way to demonstrate their substantive move towards promoting gender equality and women's rights. But over the past 30 years, Caribbean women in particular have made significant strides in education. You've heard Diane when she mentioned that they're outperforming men, but then they still encounter the structural barriers to advancing or achieving gender equality. We still have made, we still acknowledge significant strides in leadership and in economic empowerment. And so it's important for us to celebrate these milestones and to recognize the ongoing work towards building a resilient future, which is grounded in the Beijing Platform for Action and powered by the unwavering resilience of Caribbean women. And it's important too to recognize the partnership with UN Women, other UN agencies, the national gender machineries, the government-led commitments at national level to realize these gains. And in our region, we now have 45 gender policies, we have 50 plus new gender responsive laws, and we've seen a 40% increase in women-led businesses. We have more women in government, we have more women in community leadership roles, many of whom have supported through our efforts to establish women's political caucuses, to promote women-led businesses, to encourage strong relationships at all levels of society. Over 30% of our women hold parliamentary seats in the Caribbean, 27% of firms have female CEOs, making the Caribbean a world leader in this area. But despite all of this progress, our region has the highest prevalence of gender-based violence, but we also see that they are leading climate action, they are leading social causes, and they are leading development initiatives. There is a greater focus on sexual and reproductive health and rights, with more women accessing comprehensive healthcare services, although there remains a challenge with adolescent health, access by adolescents to sexual and reproductive health. And what this tells us is that Caribbean women continue to persevere and innovate and collaborate despite these challenges. Now, notwithstanding this noteworthy progress, there remain high levels of inequality. Social exclusion continue to persist, particularly among indigenous, Afro-descendant peoples and youths across Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also know that gender-based violence and family violence persists as a major public health and development and human rights issue with far-reaching consequences that continue to adversely impact on all dimensions of sustainable development. And without addressing this, there will be no progress. Now, countries in the Caribbean, many of which are states, face unique economic and fiscal constraints. We can't, unless we are able to allocate financing to ensure that the commitments that have been made to gender equality actually feature as a priority in national budgets and finance, then we are not going to achieve substantive gender equality. There still is a need for dedicated ministers to be appointed with the sole responsibility for gender within the Caribbean to ensure focused leadership and accountability to achieving gender equality across all policy areas. These public institutional mechanisms are necessary to advance women's strategic interests by implementing gender mainstreaming and to ensuring the protection of women's rights across all government policy areas. Now, UN Women is committed to promoting and advancing gender equality and women's empowerment in the Caribbean. Our initiatives focus on normative support, women's political participation and leadership, women's economic empowerment, and ending violence against women and girls. UN Women remains committed to strengthening UN leadership, women's leadership, including among women politicians and political party members. UN Women remains committed to increasing women's economic empowerment, especially among excluded groups, calling for policies and solutions to open access to innovative finance and resources and employment, decent employment, services, and to undertake solid research presenting evidence to underpin advocacy efforts. Now, advocating for equitable redistribution of unpaid care work, which is a structural barrier to women's empowerment, and recognizing women's contribution to paid work is absolutely critical, and supporting the expansion of prevention and access to services for victims of gender-based violence. We also need and depend on the commitment of governments and member states to increase access to justice, to end impunity, and to include measures to bolster the responsiveness of police and judicial officers, and to support legal reforms, and to integrate gender equality measures across national programs and plans and budgets, essentially gender mainstreaming. So I conclude with saying that UN Women stands ready. We remain willing to support member states to strengthen laws and institutions and the development of gender-responsive approaches, and to protect women and involve men as partners, and to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you so much, and I join with ECLAC and all of you in welcoming you to this dialogue, and I look forward to the discussions as we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isiwa, for this introduction. And now I would like to invite Maria Noel Baeza, Regional Director of UN Women Americas and the Caribbean Regional Office, who will present the main findings of the UN Secretary General report, highlighting also what are the trends that we need to take into consideration in this context. Thank you, Maria Noel. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, and good morning. Good morning to everybody. It's a real honor to be here with you today in this important meeting and important program. And let me acknowledge Nicole, dear Nicole, that you're here monitoring. Thank you very much. Anna Westmes, the director of the Division of Gender. Diana, it's very nice to see you. Diana Quarels, the director of ECLAC for the Caribbean in Port-au-Prince. Isuwa, our officer in charge in a multi-country office in the Caribbean. Thank you very much for your words. And I want to make a brief presentation on the main findings on the UN Secretary report that is mandated by the ECOSOC, which serves as a review and appraisal of the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the outcomes of the 23rd special session of the General Assembly. First of all, I want to highlight that the Secretary General stressed the continued relevance of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. After 30 years, this is still very, very much important, very much existing, and very much needed to respect and, of course, to be given budget. Is the most comprehensive, the Beijing Platform of Action is the most comprehensive, as others said, and visionary agenda for gender equality and women's and girls' human rights. In 1995, 189 member states of the UN unanimously adopted the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It is crucial to remind ourselves that more than 17,000 participants attended. Governments reached historic agreement and arrive at political consensus on the systemic change needed to realize women's and girls' human rights and gender equality across social, economic, political, and environment domains. The report of the Secretary General finds that over the past 5 years, states have continued to take action to advance gender equality. The top priority of member states for accelerating progress for women and girls were in the area of ending violence against women, equal and non-discriminatory under law and access of justice, quality of education, political participation, and access to health care, including sexual and reproductive rights. Progress and key new policies directions have emerged across critical areas of concerns over the past years. The proportion of states that reported strengthening care services for older people has increased from 46% in 2019 to 66% in 2024. The proportion of member states reporting measures to promote decent work for paid care workers rose from 25% to 32%. To reduce women's poverty, 79% of member states reported efforts to strengthen social protection system, up to 70% in 2019. So all this is very good trends. To realize the rights of girls' child, 77% of member states focus action on violence against girls, up from 62% in 2019, from 62 to 77. 70% of states focus actions on girls' access to education. 70%, up from 61%. On elimination violence against women and girls, 90% of the member states of the UN reported the introduction and strengthening of laws, implementation and enforcement, up to 83% that was reported in 2019. 79% of member states reported that they have introduced, updated, or expanded national action plans, up from 68%. On supporting women's participation in politics and public life, 38% of member states reported measures to prevent and investigate cases of violence against women in public life and impunity and prosecute and punish perpetrators, more than double the percentage reported in the last review period. Responding to the impact of successive crises, 42% reported adopted gender-responsive approaches to humanitarian action and crisis responded, up to 40%. So this is a small increase, but it's a trend. It's a good trend of increase. 48% of member states reported taking action to increase women's access to land, water, energy, and natural resources, an increase of 10% from 2019. Despite these efforts, there has been limited progress on gender equality outcomes, with stagnation in most areas, putting the achievement of the 2030 Agenda, as well as the vision of the Platform for Action, out of reach. The gender gap in labor force participation has remained stagnant for 20 years. 63% of women in the labor force in 2022 and 92% of men, compared to 64% and 94% in 2002. The gender pay gap remained persistent worldwide, almost 25%. So 9.8% of women and girls live in extreme poverty. While this is a slight improvement since the pandemic, at the current rate of progress, it will take 137 years to eradicate extreme poverty for women and girls in a world of unprecedented wealth for many, many few. Child marriage has declined from 24.1 to 18.7 since 2003. But at this rate, girls will continue to be married as children until 2092. And I must say that the child unions have been increasing in our continent, while it has been decreasing in Africa. However, in addition to this crisis, there are a number of bottlenecks and trends that are slowing progress on gender equality. There's a widening accountability gap for gender equality, with democratic erosion and threats to women's human rights defenders on the rise. Don't forget that our region is the worst region to be a defender of human rights. We have 90 kills last year. Growing backlash has been reinforced by the hollowing out of institutions and processes that the Beijing Plan of Action tasked with advancing gender equality. Inadequate investments in gender equality and effective solution exacerbated by the debt crisis and the failure of the international financial architecture is holding back progress for gender equality. Technological advances hold enormous promises for gender equality, but they are not currently geared towards achieving this goal, while the new risk they are creating go largely unchecked gender violence and backlash on gender equality. So instead of being an opportunity, it's not performing as we want in gender-based violence. The opportunity presented by demographic shifts across the world need to be harnessed, and the challenges they present for gender equality mitigated. Now, UN Women is making a call. It's calling for collective action on 6 high-impact measures to deliver tangible results for all women and girls and drive large-scale progress. First is drive accountability for the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and gender-responsive humanitarian action by adopting fully financed national action plans, and funding local women's organizations leading the response to crisis and conflict. Second, center women and girls' rights, including from rural and indigenous communities, as economies and societies transition to environmental sustainability, including by prioritizing them in developing new skills and gaining green jobs and ensuring that women's access to productive assets and land rights are secure. Accelerating the achievement women's full and equal decision-making power in private and public domains and at all levels of government, including by applying temporary special measures like quotas. But I prefer parity. Bridging the digital gender gap, by improving women with equal access to technology and its benefits, including mobile phone and internet, and of course, access to artificial intelligence. Transform the care economy to recognize and redistribute care work and to support women's economic and social empowerment by increasing national budgets for equitable, quality public care services. Strengthening and implement legislation to end violence against women and girls through the adoption and funding of legislation and national action plans, and support and coordinate it with community-led mechanisms to extend the reach of services. Prioritizing young people, particularly women, girls, and adolescents, at the heart of these efforts through investments in their education and health, and shifting discriminatory social norms is essential to accelerate gender equality, the empowerment and autonomy of all women and girls, and the realization of their rights, to break the cycle of exclusion, discrimination, and racism, and ensure sustainability and leaderships for the next generation. This is the promise of these 30 years that we have ahead in order to continue advancing the Beijing Platform of Action. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm standing here ready to listen to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Maria Noel, for this comprehensive analysis of the key message from the Secretary General report. Now I would like to invite Anna Westman, the Director of the Gender Bureau from the Division from Gender Affairs from ECLAC, to present the regional report on the review of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action after 30 years of its adoption, in synergy of the implementation of the regional gender agenda that is called Action for Equality, Development, and Peace in Latin America and the Caribbean. Anna, please, you have the floor.
Okay, this is a pleasure to be here with all of you today to present the main findings of the regional report from Latin America and the Caribbean countries. This is, I say hello to the minister and high-level authorities of the machineries for the advancement of women across the region. My dear Diane Warles, Director of ECLAC, a regional headquarters for the Caribbean. Maria Noel Baeza, Regional Director of UN Women of the Americas and the Caribbean, ECLAC, and all the and Terry ENC, the whole committee of Trinidad and Tobago, and Naina Ojihis, that will with us commenting these findings, and of course my team and all of you. Thank you a lot for being here. In this session, continuing with the global report, I will address the main points of the regional report of the review of the Beijing Declaration at the Platform for Action, focusing on its synergy with the regional agenda regional gender agenda. And this is a very key point that I would like to say, because we are the only region that have a regional conference where the governments across the region, all the countries, has agreed this regional gender agenda. For that, we have a roadmap with the international standard CEDAW, with the Beijing +30, but also with our regional gender agenda since 1977. Next, in this report is based on national reports submitted by 25 countries and territories in Latin America and the Caribbean, along with statistics consolidated by Gender Equality Observatory for Latin America and the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, information has been drawn for 6 national reports from Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Grenada, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Jamaica, and San Luciano. We know that this was a very difficult time with the climate change, with the hurricane across the Caribbean, so we really appreciate your effort to submit this national report. And as mentioned, Maria Noel, UN Women has prepared a global report that will be presented in the next CSW in March. So, 20 years after Beijing, we have seen progress on areas, no? So this is a region that has advanced in the democratization and a path to peace after the 90s. In fact, 3 days away was the Tlatelolco Treaty commemoration that put this region without nuclear arms. That is very important, but this is a region that is moving to the peace. This is very, very important in the global context, no? Normative frameworks. This is a region that establishes formal equality, gender equality in the law. So for that, we are talking about, this is the time of substantive equality, the equality, gender equality in the facts, at the results. And then we are looking for the strengthening of gender mainstreaming in government and in national statistics. This is important also, our cooperation with UN Women and CARICOM countries to improve national gender statistics in the last 5 years. And the trend for women entering the labor market has been positive, but progress is very slow. So the main fact in general in the report is progress, but very slow. And we need to improve measures to achieve gender equality gender equality, substantive gender equality, no? And this is a complex global backdrop marked by geopolitical instability and cascading crises. So many of the reports at the country level talk about the COVID pandemic and the profound effects in economies and societies, no? In the Caribbean, for example, the pandemic impacted the tourism and service sector, health sector also, where women tend to be concentrated. And also, we also saw increased burdens of unpaid care and domestic work. This is a trend across all the region. And also the impacts of climate change continue to intensify, no? And the situation of Caribbean countries is of particular concern. We are talking a lot with Diane and with the colleagues on the Caribbean, and with profound impact in livelihoods, economics, and sustainable development, no? And as ECLAC has posed, the region is facing 3 mutually reinforcing development traps: low growth, high inequality, and low social mobility, and weak institutional capacity. In this slide, we present the structural challenges of gender inequality in our region, no? And the key message is we need to address gender equality in a holistic and progressive manner to promote women's autonomy in the region, no? And the 4 structural challenges are socioeconomic inequality and the persistence of poverty in the framework of exclusion growth. The second is discriminatory, violent, and patriarchal cultural patterns. 3 is rigid sexual division of labor and unfair social organization of care. And this year we are revisiting the SDG 5 and the SDG 8. So the talk about paid and unpaid work is very important in this context. And 4 is concentration of power and hierarchical relations in the public sphere. The next, the Beijing Declaration, as you know very well, has 12 areas of particular concern, which have been grouped into 6 areas for this exercise by UN Women and ECLAC as in the regional review. And the first area is inclusive development, shared prosperity, and decent work. And the key message in this case is achieving these goals with gender equality hinges upon transforming the sexual division of labor, correcting the unfair distribution of care work, and ensuring women's economic autonomy. As you know, the concept of autonomy and women's economic autonomy, this is a key contribution for the region to Beijing 30 years ago, when this region posed the idea of to measure the unpaid care work. No? So this is a key contribution from our region, and now with the regional conference, with the idea of care societies. No? So this is also a main contribution from our region. In this slide, data for the region shows that low labor market participation among women remains a significant challenge across the region. No? In the Caribbean countries, female labor force participation is better than the average of the region of the LAC countries, but the gap between men and women remains very high, no? 57% in the case of the women, and 70% for men. So we could see the progress across the region, but as I mentioned before, the progress is very slow, and consequently, 1 in every 2 women is currently outside the labor market across the region. In this area, a very important finding in the regional reports is the progress in the design and implementation of care policies in the region. No? In total, 8 countries have established national care systems by law. This is a very important progress in the last 3 years. And regarding maternity leave, for instance, that is other indicator that we follow, 15 countries now provide leave of at least 14 weeks in compliance with ILO conventions, a figure that includes 3 English-speaking Caribbean countries. No, so I think at ECLAC report, we try to link CEDAW commitment with international conventions, with national advances. And also in terms of statistics, 23 countries have official time use measures, and among these are 4 English-speaking Caribbean countries. So this is not enough, but this is an important advance. And you have other indicators, and this is only a overview about all the politics, statistics, and satellite account of unpaid household work. The second critical area in the report is poverty eradication, social protection, and social services. And the key message is overcoming socioeconomic inequality and the persistence of poverty requires strengthening social protection and social service, no? From a perspective of universality, no? So this is a region that is talking the link between a guarantee of universality of social protections and women's rights is a very, very important bridge. In this case, data from the region show that inequality and the feminization of poverty remain persistent structural features in the region. No? 1 in 4 women has no income of her own, and in the case of the men is 1 in 10. So we have more progress reducing poverty, but not the feminization of poverty. So something should be changed. In the next, we have a chapter about social protection, social services, and we know despite efforts, social protection coverage remains low and inadequate in many cases to address regional crises. Countries in Caribbean have been strengthening their systems by expanding policies and programs, particularly non-contributory measures such as cash transfers and pensions to counter the effect of high informality. This is a good news. The counter cyclic policies in the region in the last crisis of COVID, but gender gaps persist in access to contributory pensions due to long-standing inequality in the labor market. Among the English-speaking Caribbean countries that submitted reports, 1 country recently expanded eligibility for pensions through normative reforms. So this is interesting. Another key issue is sexual and reproductive rights in the countries, and also the STEM education. 10 countries, for instance, provide measures to enhance the participation of women and girls in STEM fields. So we look at social protection, social services, sexual and reproductive rights, and also STEM education. The third priority area is freedom from violence, stigma, and stereotypes. And the key message is to end gender-based violence against women and girls, discriminatory and violent patriarchal cultural patterns must be changed through comprehensive and sustainable strategies. No? So in the region, this slide that although the region has made substantial strides in regulatory frameworks and increasing awareness of gender-based violence, it remains severe and persistent. Looking at race of femicide or feminicide in 13 Latin American countries, we see the problem is persistent. And regarding the national prevalence surveys, between 63 and 76% of women in the region have experienced some form of gender-based violence, not only in the framework of the intimate relation, but in many places at the world, at the street, and the cyberspace. So this is a pandemic approach in the region. We also see similar, and we have every year more countries across the Caribbean reporting to the regional observatory. This is a very positive, but we select the countries that we have comparative in the last 3 years, and data from 8 countries presenting absolute numbers confirms that gender-based violence remains a critical concern across our region. The main progress in the region is in the law. All countries in the Caribbean have laws to end violence against women. At the region, 14 countries have enhanced comprehensive laws that broaden the understanding of violence. We have 19 countries have criminalized femicide, and 10 countries have put in place standards on the production of data and information on violence against women and girls. And lastly, 15 countries prohibit child marriage without exception. That is, as you know, an important challenge across the region. In the next, we also observe specific regulatory gains in the Caribbean. 5 non-Spanish English-speaking Caribbean countries have national plans or action strategies that coordinate policies against gender-based violence, and 3 have ratified ILO 190 convention, the Violence and Harassment Convention, the last on 2019. And laws on domestic violence have been revisited in several Caribbean countries, expanding the definition of sexual violence to include marital context and early pregnancy. And 3 English-speaking Caribbean in particular have adopted new legal measures and response protocol. All of that you have in the report that we will send you before the CSW with all the update presented here. No? And finally, and then we are on the 4th theme is participation, accountability, and gender responsive institutions. And the message is to achieve women's full and meaningful participation while ensuring accountability and building gender responsive institutions. It's vital to take out the concentration of power in the public and private sphere. This is a region that is moving to parity, no? So we need to move, accelerate the route. In this slide, we talk about that. We see that 35% of national parliamentary seats are held by women in Latin America, according to the SDG indicator, and compare it with the Caribbean, that is higher. For local deliberative bodies, the proportion of seats is 27.2. Among for English and non-Spanish speaking Caribbean countries that report data, this proportion rates is very different across the countries, no? From 18 to 66%. And 9 countries have adopted constitutional reforms or legislation aimed at achieving parity, and others have quota laws, no? Next, our 5 The focus area is peaceful and inclusive societies, and progress in this realm requires implementing the Women and Peace and Security Agenda, along with effectively protecting women human rights defenders. Maria Noel and Diane mentioned that. This is a key contribution also from the region to the global level, but we need to make more progress on that. And 11 countries has adopted at least one national action plan on women, peace, and security. This is a challenge for the Caribbean. No? Caribbean countries have the challenge of establishing this plan. This is a year of commemoration also in October of the resolution, and we need the engagement of the Caribbean countries on that. And regarding the Escazú Agreement, 17 countries in the region are party to this first regional environmental agreement in Latin America and the Caribbean, which contains specific provisions concerning human rights defenders in environmental matters. And this is very important also contribution from the region. 7 countries in the Caribbean are parties to the Escazú Agreement. And in the last conference of the parties last year, the decision was adopted about gender mainstreaming in the Caribbean. No? So this is also an important advance. And we highlight in the report the final agreement for ending the conflict and establish the peace between Colombia and the FARC. Okay. Okay. In this, in the 6th area, environmental conservation, protection, and restoration, the key message is environmental conservation, protection, and restoration should be reinforced through policies that acknowledge women's contribution. No? So, and mainstream gender and strengthening intersectoral coordination. We note, okay. In this case, as I mentioned, regional progress in the development of specific gender and climate change plans, and in mainstreaming the gender perspective in regulatory frameworks and environmental and public policy, we have 15 countries that have developed action plan, gender and climate change. We have the cooperation of UNDP on this area. And following this measure implementing in the Caribbean. A second point that we highlight in the report is the capacity of the countries to respond to disaster from a gender perspective, developing of gender equality early warning system, training on flood management and gender-based violence, provision of shelters and resilience building activities for women, and implementing of strategic plans to prevent gender-based violence in emergency contexts. So the last section is about the recommendation for action, and our key message is how to accelerate implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in synergy with regional gender agenda. And the recommendations are 6. First is fostering inclusive development, shared prosperity, and decent work. As I mentioned, we need to promote labor inclusion policies, affirmative action for women in male-dominated sector, and of course in the innovation, technology, STEAM careers, and formalization of process. No, and we are talking a lot about that in the next regional conference in Mexico. Second is reducing inequality and poverty by strengthening social protection policies, infrastructure and social services, universal social services, to enhance economic security and opportunities. Third, ending gender-based violence and discrimination, enforce law, strengthen institutions, and implementing policies in a comprehensive approach. This is the key approach also. No? Four is parity and inclusive governance. We need parity, ensure women's full and equal participation in all areas, enforce parity, laws and quota, and protect human rights with an intersectional approach. And five is women, peace and security, promote women's role in peace processes in compliance with Security Council resolution, and of course, move the implementation of human rights defenders' rights and other regional human mobility challenges. No? And Escazú agreement, this is a key contribution from the region. No? And last, environmental protection, conservation, and restoration, strengthening policies for in these areas, and foster free, prior, and informed consent of communities and indigenous peoples in environmental decision-making. No? Then we talk about enabling conditions and drivers for the full and effective implementation. And first, with regard to gender institutions, gender machineries, 7% of the machineries in Latin America are high level. In the Caribbean, the rate is 17%. So as you know, this is a main recommendation of the Beijing and regional agenda that increase the level and resources, of course, of the gender institution. The second area enabling is information system. First is financing is critical, and many of the national report mentioned financing as a key critical issue. So we require to push for fiscal compacts that increase revenue progressively and use expenditures strategically to promote gender equality and sustainability. And finally, but this is a very important energy and contribution across the region, is civil society participation. No? Women's and feminist organizations are fundamental to the promotion of women's rights and gender equality. And finally, I would like to highlight the statement by our Executive Secretary, José Manuel Salazar Siriñans, and he said, it is time to make strategic investments and develop public policies to advance towards a substantive gender equality and a care society. This underscores the importance of prioritizing care-related initiatives, institutional reinforcement, and gender-responsive strategy, especially in the Caribbean, where unique geographic and socioeconomic challenges persist. This call to action serves as a rallying cry. By uniting our efforts, we can pave the way for more inclusive societies in which women and girls live and build a resilient future founded on equality, care, and shared opportunities. Thank you for your attention and for accompanying us through this detailed review of the regional report on And I appreciate your time and look forward to any questions or comments you may have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anna Westman, for this comprehensive presentation of the report. Now I would like to move to the next segment. I know we have some challenge in terms of time, but I think this is a very, very important segment, which we really want to listen to the different views and perspective from different Caribbean countries. We would like to assess what are the trends, the emerging issues, and the new approaches to accelerate the progress to advance gender equality. So we would like now to ask delegations delegates from the Caribbean who want to speak during this segment, that please you can raise your hand by clicking the react button. There is an option in the Zoom window. And then when you click in the react button, there is an option that says raise your hand. And countries will have up to 3 minutes to make their interventions in order to ensure we have different comments from different representatives that are here in the meeting today. Some countries already sent manifest their interest to make interventions prior by email. So we would like to ask if they are here in the meeting today, if they would like to take the floor. So please, if you can raise your hand. So we have this moment to listen from your perspectives about what are the main challenge and progress that you reflected in your national report. I acknowledge the representative from Jamaica, if you would like to take the floor.
Let's see if I can open my, okay, you cannot, okay. So it's telling me I can't open my video, but so I'll just go ahead and,
yeah.
I can now? Let's try.
Yes, let's try.
The message says you cannot start because of host. So I guess they will enable me. So can I go ahead in the meantime?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I'll be very brief. 2025 is a watershed moment for the gender architecture in Jamaica as it turns the spotlight on the appraisal and the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in strategic alignment with the implementation of the regional gender agenda and the outcomes of the 23rd special session of the General Assembly. This serves as a pivot for seamless and cohesive coordination towards ending violence against women and girls in line with the priorities of the Beijing Platform for Action and Political Declaration. The series of ongoing actions towards implementing strategies is ongoing and is being done in partnership with a number of key stakeholders, ministry departments, agencies, the private sector, non-governmental organizations, community groups, faith-based organizations, and other members of civil society. It also involves strategic gender-responsive budgeting and costing to facilitate a robust implementation of our oversight documents, of which I speak of the National Policy for Gender Equality, which is our Raising the Trade for Gender Mainstreaming, or National Strategic Action Plan to Eliminate Gender-Based Violence in Jamaica, as well as the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act. Now, all of this is complemented by intensive monitoring and evaluation processes, which are ongoing to facilitate nuanced reporting on the progress to end impunity and to tackle the very vexed and pervasive issues that include violence against women and a range of other issues. The government of Jamaica remains committed to strengthening and accelerating efforts to end violence against women and to ensure that the gender architecture remains strident. I would want to just share very quickly a few of the achievements in perhaps a sentence. We have the ongoing implementation of the strategy that I talked about, that's the NSAP. And under that, we have 5 strategic priority areas. For each of the areas, we have done specific actions. So the one that speaks to protection is very big for us. And so we have established shelters, national shelters. Those allow us to support persons who are survivors or victims of gender-based violence through a space that is safe. And to make it a little more pronounced, we have in 2022 launched a continuum of care for survivors of gender-based violence. This continuum of care is what we call our wraparound services. So all of the service providers who have anything to do with gender-based violence, whether it is a prevention activity that they are doing a service, they are providing legal support, whatever it is that is being done, psychosocial counseling and support, it is folded into that continuum of care. We've also looked at amending legislation. So the Domestic Violence Act, which is the most ambitious legislation we have that treats with survivors and victims of gender-based violence, we have made amendments to that and we're still doing it. It's at this point at the Joint Select Committee of Parliament, and we're undergoing what we call a statutory review to ensure that the amendments match the gravity of the offense and that the brand new legislation will fold in all of the bits and pieces that have been discussed while we wait for the implementation to take place and for this new adoption, the adoption of this new part of the legislation. We've also been implementing our Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act, and that became operational on the 3rd of July, 2023. And to date, we have been issuing certificates of compliance to a number of entities who have developed their own sexual harassment workplace policies and have done intensive sensitization of their staff to ensure that they are very, very aware of what it is that allows persons to know where to go if they need to complain of an act of harassment and what is in place. The unit, of course, that assists the National Shelter Unit would be the Gender-Based Violence Helpline Unit. And that is also designed to make sure that when persons report cases of violence, or whether it's done to them or somebody they know, that there is a space to receive the report and to provide the response that is required. The final thing I want to say is that the gender architecture in Jamaica is comprised of several moving parts which work seamlessly together to create a gender harmonious society in which all persons will feel valued, safe, protected, and that their human rights are recognized, upheld, and protected. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon Coburn, for your excellent presentation and sharing how much you are advancing at the national level. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Antigua and Barbuda, Jamie Sanders. You have the floor.
Hello, good day. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we can see you.
Excellent. So I'll be very brief. My intervention will kind of just look a little bit at our submission of our Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action report. We're proud to have been one of the first islands within the Caribbean to have submitted our report. For us, we had a very strong national buy-in from various stakeholders, including the government, civil societies, etc. One second, sorry. Yeah. Civil society, etc. In our report, what we would have highlighted as some strong areas where we would have recognized some achievements are one, our response towards addressing gender-based violence, primarily through our support and referral center, which is a one-stop mechanism towards meeting the needs of survivors in terms of medical, legal, and psychosocial services. We would have also highlighted our data collection efforts through the Support and Referral Center in terms of gender-based violence, where we collect comprehensive information that can then be used to inform policy. We highlighted that we would have drafted policy to be presented to our cabinet, looking at things such as the gender-based violence strategic action plan and also a workplace harassment and discrimination policy. And we highlighted that Antigua and Barbuda signed on to the C-190 Convention to signal again our commitment to addressing gender-based violence and even instances of harassment within a workplace context. Another area that we would have recognized doing good work in is gender responsive climate change and disaster risk management. Antigua has been one of the regional leaders in that, as we would have held the Small Island Developing States Fourth International Conference. Our Department of Environment was one of the first islands in the Caribbean to gain access to the Green Climate Fund, which has very comprehensive gender reporting and integration requirements. And so we've worked along quite closely with them, as well as our National Office of Disaster Services, to ensure that our response to natural disasters and climate change is robust. We also highlighted our gains in terms of, women's economic empowerment. Through the Prime Minister's office, we have Prime Minister's Entrepreneurial Development Fund, where persons seeking to be involved in entrepreneurship are given grants and low interest loans to be able to fund and subsidize their efforts. And a substantial amount of women have been prioritized for this. The Directorate of Gender Affairs also has quite a bit of empowerment economic programs, such as our work and life skills programs, which provides capacity building and training in areas where women can gain tangible dividends upon the end of learning those skills. So everything from sewing to cooking to non-traditional things like mechanical and engineering type initiatives and skills. I won't go through all of what the strengths are in terms of challenges, things like data collection, in terms of a more diverse data set to really inform our policy and our institution approaches towards issues facing women, expanding our response to gender-based violence to include perpetrator rehabilitation. We did have some pilot programs with support from UN Women in that respect, but that's something we really want to institutionalize. Women in leadership and political leadership is an area for significant improvement. In our upper house, we do have about 4 women in the Senate, including the president of the upper house. But in the lower house, at the moment, we just have 1 woman, Honorable Maria Brown. And so we want to see some more improvement in that respect. And so in a nutshell, just bearing in mind the time, that would have been our process and some of our achievements and challenges. Thanks for the
Thank you very much, Jamie Sander, for this comprehensive also information regarding your challenges and progress in Antigua and Barbuda. Now we would like to give the floor to Shefania Jahangir from the head of Bureau of the Gender Affairs in Suriname.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shefania Jahangir, head of the Bureau of Gender Affairs. On behalf of the Bureau, I congratulate all of you with the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women and the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This commitment has served as a guiding framework for the development of numerous national gender equality plans worldwide and has supported efforts in placing and maintaining gender equality on the agenda of national governments. In Suriname as well, the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action has led to many institutional, policy, and legal changes, and much more awareness on the importance of gender equality among various parts of society, all with the aim of empowering women and girls and promoting gender equality. In 1997, the National Bureau for Gender Policy, the current Bureau for Gender Affairs, was established, and shortly thereafter, the government gender management system was installed to mainstream gender within government policy. Various gender policy plans have since then been developed and implemented. The most recent one is the Gender Vision Policy Document 2021 2035, which was launched in 2019. In the past years, existing legislation has also been tested for conformity with international obligations and amended and gaps have been filled with new laws. In this context, I would like to mention the revision of the criminal code with regard to sexual offenses, human trafficking, and stalking, amendment of the law on nationality and residency, the adoption of the law on combating domestic violence, the Family Protection Act, and most recently in 2022, the adoption of the Violence and Sexual Harassment in Employment Act and the Equal Treatment in Employment Act. Several gender awareness programs have been implemented, and the production of sex disaggregated data has improved. The achievements haven't resulted only from government efforts, but also from civil society organizations and development partners. The latter two have played an important role in the past 15 years, given that the government is struggling with a precarious financial situation. This precarious financial situation, combined with other challenges such as a shortage of experts, insufficient gender awareness among policymakers and civil servants, and weak institutions, have caused a huge delay in the translation of laws and policy plans into actions and threatened to reverse the progress already made. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic has not only caused delays and setbacks, but has also exposed the weak links in our gender equality infrastructure that needs urgent attention. Climate change is a major challenge at which the global community needs to give more attention to. It has consequences for our livelihoods, and we therefore need to not only make communities, including women and children, resilient, but also strengthen the institutions that have to ensure this. In Suriname, for example, we have observed that the drought has impacted many communities in the interior. Village communities have become difficult to reach due to dried up rivers, resulting in limited access to education, healthcare, and essential services. Their livelihoods are at risk due to the loss of agricultural crops, hunting, and fishing areas. Along the coast, agriculture and residential areas are lost due to flooding. In short, these challenges directly affect progress towards achieving gender equality. In order to have a more just world, a world in which both women and men have equal opportunities, it is necessary that we intensify our efforts at all levels, and collaboration is utmost necessary. We believe that the political declaration to be adopted at the upcoming CSW session will remind and inspire us to continue to do so. In this context, our thanks to ECLAC and UN Women for creating this platform for sharing experiences and insights to tackle the new emerging issues threatening gender equality. Though I like to note that although not reflected in the presentations of this morning, Suriname has submitted its plus 30 Beijing Platform for Action report in November 2024. I would like to conclude by stating that the Surinamese government remains committed to achieving the gender equality goals and will use all available resources to achieve them. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Representative from Suriname, for your intervention. I would like to ask other representatives from governments from the Caribbean if they would like to take the floor. We have a couple of minutes more for this space of exchange and receive these inputs and insight from the different perspectives. You can raise your hand, clicking in the react button, and then choosing the right hand option. You can also include it on the chat. I acknowledge the representative from Trinidad and Tobago, so please, you have the floor.
Good day, everyone. Shalian Hart, Director of Gender Affairs under the Office of the Prime Minister for Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for having us here this morning. Just to give a brief overview of advancing gender equality in Trinidad and Tobago, I would first lead off with some of our key legislation passed within the reporting period of Beijing, the current reporting period. So we would have started with our DV Amendment Act of 2020, which expanded the coverage of persons to be protected as it relates to gender-based violence under our law. So it extended to visiting relationship, it covers children involved in the relationship, etc. We had amendments to our Sexual Offences Act. So I'll just give those two key ones, and then when we move on to policy, Trinidad and Tobago would have received approval and launched its National Strategic Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence in March 2024, and also established two committees later in 2024 to oversee the implementation of this National Strategic Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence. Mainly the Technical Working Group, which is the committee of technocrats, which allow for the actual interlacing between interagency and interministerial collaborations. I should highlight that both committees are made up of representatives from government, civil society, and private sector to help inform the process, because as we know, as gender machineries, we can't do it alone. It's an all of government, all of society approach. Trinidad and Tobago also have in the process of finalizing our Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan. So it's being finalized to go to Cabinet for approval. In the area of women and in the economy, in terms of economic empowerment of women, we've established our STEP program, which is the Survivors Transformation and Empowerment Program for victims and survivors of violence, both male and female. It's a three-pronged program where they can access 3 different types of grants. NGO level, where they can, an NGO, civil society organization, can access funding to conduct training for victims. And there's also a grant to victims themselves, a scholarship grant to pursue education, be it academic, tech, work, or any skill level training. And there's a grant towards either starting their business or growing their business. We also had a series of women's villages across Trinidad and Tobago, and this was to showcase female entrepreneurs. So the Gender Affairs Division would have gone to different regions of Trinidad and Tobago and hold these women's villages, and we showcase the women, the female entrepreneurs in and around that area to the public. So they were exposed not only to the public, but we invited other businesses, supermarkets, other entrepreneurs, so that they could get that networking between and amongst themselves, as well as showcase their products. We would have also asked them to submit content, and their content was collected, and videos and pictures taken and posted of the various businesses on our website, on Facebook pages, and social media, so that persons, whether in Trinidad and Tobago or across the globe, can access them and see what products or services that they offer. We've also expanded our data capturing and analysis, and also through our central registry. Originally, it was the Central Registry on Domestic Violence, and we've expanded it now to cover gender-based violence. We have named it Umbuno. And what Umbuno allows us to do, it's not only collect data, but allow the various agencies that respond or treat with domestic violence or gender-based violence, whether it be government or civil society on some level, incorporated into the system. So a seamless transition could be experienced by victims or survivors of violence. So for example, there's hotline data going in. We are about to add the shelters to the system, so that when our domestic violence hotline is looking for spaces, they can not only just call, but the system would allow the shelters at a glance to see that they would receive, if they are willing to receive a client, our Ministry of Social Development will be able to see and add what interventions they will be doing for them through a comprehensive case management system. Also, Trinidad and Tobago has also updated their package of children legislation and widened the protection for children in terms of shelters. We are also working through our Children's Authority at moving children from residential care to more of dorm-like family structure. So that is something Trinidad is currently pushing ahead on. We have a number of youth development programs to involve young people in decision making, and the Gender Affairs Division would have launched its Men's Bureau in December. And our Men's Bureau is twofold: to address the issues of men and boys, of course, but also to educate men and boys on the issues affecting women and girls, and to garner their support and educate them, etc. And I must say, while I am doing that, special thanks to Jamaica and Grenada, who would have been virtually part of Trinidad and Tobago's Men's Forum hosted last year and presented for us on their Men's Bureau. So that is how we were able to inform and design ours. So thank you to my Caribbean colleagues, Jamaica and Grenada, and to all the others who would have provided support along the way. So that is just a quick oversight of Trinidad and Tobago, and you all will learn more about us at CSW 69. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'd like to give the floor to the representative from Grenada, and later on to the representative of the Bahamas. So Grenada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nicole. Are we able to hear me loud and clear?
Yes, and we can also see you if you click the video button. We hope so.
Let me try.
Yes, we can see you.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's good that I'm coming on the heels virtually of my colleague from Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you so much for allowing us the space to share what we have been able to achieve over the last 5 years since our last reporting cycle for Beijing, the Beijing Plus platform. We have made some strides, a lot of strides actually, in advancing gender equality and empowering women. And this was achieved mainly through policy development, legislative reforms, and targeted interventions. So some of the key ones I would like to identify at this point in time is the Spotlight Initiative, which was implemented between the year 2020, and that was in the height of COVID, but nonetheless, 2020 to 2023. And we were one of the successful partners with UN Women, UNDP, a lot of the UN agencies, including EU as well as Global Affairs Canada, etc. So we were fortunate enough to win that opportunity because this allowed us to further contribute to eliminate efforts to eliminate violence against women and girls and to work towards legal reform, prevention programs, and improved services for survivors. Another one of our accomplishments would be the policy and legislative advances. So we continue the implementation of our National Gender Equality Policy and Action Plan, which was commissioned by UN Women in 2014 and had a 10-year lifespan. It expired in 2024. But through this mechanism, we were able to continue the implementation of GPA. We also introduced the gender responsive budgeting in 2022. So that took root. Under the Spotlight Initiative project, we drafted 17 bills that was related to family law, sexual offenses, domestic violence, and victim rights. And it included increasing the legal marriage age to 18 and the creation of a sexual offenders registry. A third accomplishment was the strengthening of our gender-based violence responses. So we saw the establishment of the Grenada InfoSave, which was a web-based system for collecting GBV-related data. We saw capacity building for over 500 government officials. So that's whole of government approach, and 60 civil society members and 25 parliamentarians. And that mechanism, particularly I want to zero in on the parliamentarians. The parliamentarians came on board and they remain very enthusiastic for pushing the agenda of gender. And that was critical because that buy-in helps to make the work less tedious. A fourth area is the Women's Economic Empowerment Initiatives. So we were able to use mechanisms to promote women's leadership and financial inclusion. And with our efforts were primarily aimed at supporting female entrepreneurs and increasing women's participation, particularly in traditionally male-dominated industries. And our fifth gain that I would like to identify is how we were able to continue to look at advancing women in leadership. And we continue to see an increased numbers in terms of political representation, with women holding high-level leadership positions in government, including 46.7% female representation in Parliament in 2018. I would also like to identify that in 2022, yes, the Ministry of Gender Affairs was now elevated to becoming a department. So it is now Ministry of Social Development and Community Development, Housing, and Gender Affairs. So the government of Grenada took a stance of elevating. We have many collapsed portfolios across the ministry, but to actually take the stance of elevating gender affairs to being a part of the ministry's port name is indicative of the intention of government to put gender equality squarely in the forefront. So what we look at in terms of the recommendations for future actions, we realize that we need to strengthen our legal protections. We need to institutionalize gender responsive budgeting, right? Making it mandatory for all ministries to incorporate gender considerations into the planning. We will need to expand our GBV prevention programs. So we will need to scale up our behavior change initiatives that incorporate men and boys as partners, and also realize that men and boys are also at risk of being victims of violence. We would need to continue to strengthen our GBV survivor support system, including access to justice and the economic reintegration programs. We would need to enhance our data collection and monitoring, and that is a current and constant request for data. If we're looking at evidence-based planning, we need to strengthen our data collection and our monitoring frameworks. We also would look at how we need to boost women's economic and leadership opportunities, and look towards increasing investment in STEM education and mentorship for young women, as well as strengthening access to financial resources and training for women entrepreneurs. And finally, in terms of recommendations, we need to ensure that our social protection and climate resilience addresses gender disparities in disaster preparedness and our climate resilience strategies to ensure that women and girls, vulnerable groups, are central to planning and decision making. So finally, as we have demonstrated a strong commitment to gender equality with achievements in policy reform, GBV response, and women's economic empowerment, we also realize that we need sustained investments, legal enforcement, enhanced institutional coordination, which would be necessary to accelerate our progress and fully realize the goals set under the Beijing Platform for Action, our Sustainable Development Goals, and our National Sustainable Development Plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative from Grenada, for sharing this progress and these important advances you have at national level. We would like to give the floor to the representative of Bahamas, and we ask if she can also rename, so we ensure that it's well reflected, the representation. Thank you very much, Representative from Bahamas.
Okay, there we go. A little technical challenge there. So thank you very much. I want to join my colleagues in expressing congratulations on the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action and all the partners, and for the work that we all continue to do for the empowerment of women and girls. So despite our limited resources, the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, which falls under the portfolio of the Ministry of Social Services, Information and Broadcasting, remains committed to promoting the physical, economic, and social empowerment of our women and girls. Our government is committed to enacting legislation and putting into place policies to advance gender equality in our country. There are a number of frameworks that guide the work of the department, and one of these is the department strategic plan. The other is the gender-based violence strategic plan, which was rolled out in 2015 by a team that was appointed by the cabinet. And another is the draft gender policy, although not fully approved. Work continues to implement the strategies that are therein. The department's programming initiatives include one that focuses on the family. There was a campaign that was launched recently called Strong Families Make Stronger Communities. And it was our thinking that persons within families, women and girls, needed that attention. And so we needed the focus to be on the entire family to strengthen them. Just in July of last year, we dubbed a week in July as National Family Week, where the focus was placed on the entire family. And though we have many households that are headed by women, we have engaged the church or faith-based organizations to join us. And we found that these were strategic partners. In some instances, we have some of the faith-based organizations that are populated by more women than men. So we thought that it was wise to reach out to leaders from faith-based organizations to assist us with our programming initiatives to service women and girls, as well as men and boys. So we thought that this was an excellent partnership that we forged, and that will continue. There are a number of empowerment programs, and again, we reach out to our partners. One of them is the Bahamas Development Bank, whom we've reached out to assist with programs. And one of them is the coming together of the entrepreneurs who are women, some of them with multiple dependent children, but they've been very strategic in bringing these programs together, reducing the rates, loan rates, so that they can have advancement in their businesses. With regard to violence, addressing violence, the government has just recently in 2023 promoted or enacted the Protection Against Violence Act. And this act makes provisions for the establishment of a Protection Against Violence Commission, a secretariat, and other bodies that will coordinate the work. We are very happy that we have technical assistance from some of the various partners in the communities that have gender-based violence as their platform. One of the initiatives coming out of the strategic plan of 2015 is the Family Island Coordination Councils. And these are bodies that have been forged in the various communities, various Family Island communities, to look specifically at what goes on within those local contexts. The Bahamas is an archipelago of many islands. And so these leaders within the various communities have been called on to volunteer and come forward, put together plans and programs to assist with addressing gender-based violence within their local communities. So very proud of that accomplishment. To date, we've had 7 of them established in 7 different communities. They comprise persons from the law enforcement, from the medical sector. We have some from the school system because we have girls as well involved. And so there is just a great group of professional persons and community leaders who have come together to address the issue of violence. So I just want to end there. I just wanted to highlight those few initiatives that the Bahamas is engaged in at the time. And we would be happy to share more during the CSW meeting. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Representative from Bahamas. We really look forward to continue this discussion at CSW too. Now we would like to give the floor to Kemoloi Murphy, a Gender Development Coordinator from Anguilla, and then later on to the representative from St. Lucia. So Anguilla.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to share on the progress on the implementation of the Beijing platform in Anguilla. Unfortunately, we did not submit a national report. We're still hoping to submit a written document at some point, hopefully by March. So in Anguilla, we have seen a mixture of gains in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Some notable progress for us would be the passage on the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act in 2015. This strengthens the commitment to providing greater protection for victims of domestic violence. We have also seen the implementation of the Anguilla Relations Act in 2018, and we had further amendments in 2019 and 2020. We have been making a strong position for some sort of policy or act around workplace harassment. We have yet to see that. We have also taken some steps to strengthen legislation around child and social protection. So we have some notable legislations: the Social Protection Act, the Child Protection Act, the Maintenance of Child Act, Child Justice Act, and some of those acts have also been amended this year. We've also seen a major milestone in the development of our 24/7 toll-free hotline that is dedicated to providing support to gender-based violence survivor. It was launched in 2020, and we have seen where persons in the community have been utilizing the helpline. We have seen an increase in reports of DV, and we've also kind of formed a multi-agency approach in responding to DV around that. And right now we're actually working on a national DV protocols, which will guide the response to that multi-agency response to domestic violence. We have also seen an increase in female representation in Parliament. As a matter of fact, we are due for general elections on the 26th of this month, and we have recorded the highest number of female candidates so far. We now have a total of 9 candidates who will be female candidates who will be contesting the general elections in Anguilla on the 26th of February. So that's an increase for us. We currently have sitting in Parliament, I believe, 4 women. We have, in terms of health, we would have introduced the HPV vaccine for girls in 2016. We started from girls 9 to 13. We've also extended it for boys in 2023. We've also increased timely access to pap smears in the public sector. So since 2023, the Ministry of Health, they have been providing that to ladies during at polyclinics and so forth. And in 2023, 87 women would have actually accessed pap smears in primary health centers. The government have also implemented a Senior Shield subsidiary for older persons. We have seen where over 1,000 persons would have registered for this. 54% of that is women. We've also introduced just this year, a junior shield for young children under the age of 5 years, and the uptake for registration for that has been really positive as well. We would have also launched a Family First program that provides support to families, including a robust parenting program. We do know that there's an issue with childcare and women bearing most of that burden. So what we have done, we have actually provide childcare for parents who want to attend our programs and initiatives. We've also extended for parents who are guardians of special education needs children, and we are rolling out with that program and strengthening that program this year. While we have seen some gains, we do have quite a number of challenges that we're navigating. Key is the limited human resource capacity. The unit still remains a one-person unit with limited financial and other resources, and so really and truly it's been a challenge to navigate policy programming and all the work that needs to be done to mainstream gender development across the island. We also have a challenge where quite a number for legal and policy reform does not really consider gender our call for gender assessment or budgeting. And so there's a need for us to review national laws with a gender lens. The unit has been taking steps to advocate for that. Hopefully we'll see some gains in that area. And there's again the lack of linking gender affairs or gender development to national economic development. We do see where there's some challenge there in understanding the role and impact of the national gender machinery and how it can contribute to the economic prosperity of Anguilla. And so we're hoping that as time progresses and as we continue with the work that we're doing, that we will see some gains in those areas. We do hope to continue to work on the development of our national report and hope to submit something by March. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And now we acknowledge Danae Joseph, Director from the Division for Gender Relations of the Ministry for Public Service, Home Affairs, and Labor and Gender Affairs. So you have the floor.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and I would just love to join my other colleagues in congratulating ECLAC and UN Women for a comprehensive report and also for the consistent strides that they've been making in terms of compiling the work and presenting those levels of analysis that we, have the benefit of being able to see trends and so on in the Caribbean. I also want to validate some of the trends that have been highlighted in the report that was just recently presented. Some of these are reflected also in our national report, some of the trends that we're seeing in the Caribbean. Noteworthy, I just wanted to mention some of the gains that St. Lucia has made in the last 5 years. And these really are concentrated on the visibility of gender equality as a national development imperative in the Caribbean. And so I really wanted to reiterate the importance of ensuring that these are actually secured and protected. I think that is the word that I wanted to use. So the legislation was strengthened, especially for domestic violence in 2022. And there has now been a gender focal point system in operation for the last 2 years now, from 2023. And because of that, there's a little greater visibility in gender equality programming across the various ministries and departments and agencies in St. Lucia. The political representation of women, I do recognize, especially from the report as well, that that's one of the areas that we have the greatest challenge in the Caribbean. However, in St. Lucia, we are also in that same situation in terms of participation of women in elective politics. However, for the first time this year, this term anyway, we have seen parity in terms of participation in the upper house, that's as senators. And so that this is a huge jump for us because this is also a decision-making space. And the challenge for us now is to find innovative ways to get women more interested in elective politics, where they can serve in cabinet, where the highest decision, well, a lot of the decisions are being made in parliament as well, where the senators serve, very high level decisions are being made, but we also want them in cabinet. We also want to ensure that we look at the possibility of broadening political participation to include, well, not possibility of including them because they're already included in terms of decision making, but at a community level, especially in terms of climate change and so on, the participation of women at that level, at the local government and so on, and then perhaps try to understand why is it that for elective politics there's such low participation when at the community level and in other areas there is that level of leadership that's being sought. And so the work that is currently being done around violence against women in politics, I think it is of interest in that regard. And that is something that maybe the Caribbean as a whole, we should pay greater attention to, considering that this is a challenge that continues to persist. One of the pushbacks that we have, one of the challenges that we expressed in our report, which I want to just speak a little on, is on the pushback on gender equality. There is a notion in the Caribbean that we've arrived at some place that we know that we've not arrived at, right? So there's this notion of having achieved a certain level or an acceptable level of gender equality that continues to be discussed in places, including in decision-making spaces. This is a challenge and it's a threat to the continued progress for gender equality. And I think that as a Caribbean, we probably need to pay closer attention to that trend and see to what extent we can address this pushback in a very strategic way. Some of the reasons may be because of lack of information, a lack of information that is coming from us or being generated from the gender bureaus. And so, you know, when there's a lack of data, people look at anecdotes and make conclusions that may not necessarily be based in facts and data. And so the need for increased monitoring and reporting, I think, is highlighted here in that particular challenge. Another area that I think that is also coming out in this report and in other regional conversations is the engagement of men and boys and how we are actually treating with this. I believe that there is an opportunity within the Caribbean space for us to do more research on the things that we are observing. So we are observing greater dropout of boys at the tertiary level. We need to be able to research this, especially juxtaposed against the participation of men in comparison to women in the workplace. It's in the conversations around the gender pay gaps and so on, because although we are seeing a greater dropout of men as we move up the educational ladder, we're not seeing that same kind of trend reflected in pay and economic empowerment. And so this, I think that the need here is not so much for implementing, already initiatives, but specifically doing more research so that we understand exactly what this is, what these trends really are, and then to understand the relevance within the gender equality space. Having said that, I just wanted to also, highlight some of the other issues that in St. Lucia we are dealing with: women's poverty and unpaid care and domestic work that is more skewed towards women, and the work around that so as to take off those structural barriers for women's economic empowerment is considered to be a high priority for us this year. This is highlighted this year more than the other years before, and I think it presents an opportunity through the work that's being done in the region on through the Build Back Equal project and other projects of women's economic empowerment, where we can make some strides in that, specifically in the development of laws and policies on care. Having said that, I just want to congratulate everyone again on the 30 years of implementation of Beijing. And of course, you'll be hearing more from my minister at CSW in that regard. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Janet Joseph, also to assess and share the new trends or emerging issues that needs to us to have a new understanding of what are the new challenge for advancing gender equality. Now I would like to give the floor to Lester Gay, from the coordinator of the Bureau of Gender Affairs in Dominica. And you also are welcome to open your camera.
I'm sorry. So good morning. I'm sorry about that. So I don't have a camera on my desktop, so you'll only be hearing my voice.
No problem. We can hear you.
So I really want to say I'm really appreciative of having the opportunity to at least be part of this meeting. I'm relatively new, so I'm just getting my feet wet, kind of, as to how I move forward as the coordinator of the Bureau of Gender Affairs. But there are some things I'd really like to highlight as relates to what I realized some of my counterparts from the other Caribbean islands are speaking about. And we've made quite a bit of strides, I think, in Dominica in recent times. And let me start off by saying right now we are fortunate enough to have our first state representative woman president in Dominica. So that shows that we are actually making strides as it relates to women and women being in specific positions. So we do have a female president for the first time in the Commonwealth of Dominica represented. In addition to that, our parliament actually do consist of about between 40 to 45% of women who are parliamentary representatives. So it means that the women's agenda is being pushed forward a little more. And having women in leadership positions are starting to be something that is pretty common here in Dominica. In fact, our public service is predominantly women in most of the positions. So I just want to highlight that. But apart from that, we've also done a few strides as it relates to the judiciary aspect and the legal aspect of it. So we just revisited some of our acts, and we did revisit our Domestic Violence Act in 2023, which we've added some new stuff into it, some new information into it as it relates to domestic violence and intimate partner relation. And we've also taken the opportunity to add the Maintenance Act, to revisit the Maintenance Act because it was a bit archaic, and we've done a bit of work on that. So women get a lot of more rights. Before it would be more difficult for women to access loans and so on from banks and if they don't, their names are not on family land papers and so on. So we've made that stride, which I think is a really good thing, with young developing women having an opportunity to enhance themselves and empower themselves. So we revisited some of these acts in 2023. In addition to that, we've done a lot of training with our ministries, departments, and agencies on gender mainstreaming, which is really important, and is something I have been reiterating and echoing from since I came here, how important it is to have a gender agenda in each of our departments: planning, environment, health, blue and green economy, and all of the ministries that we have, because it will mean that we're no longer focusing on gender only from a perspective of a male and female aspect, but just generally into all of the plannings and work plans that we are developing. So that is something that I've been pushing a lot, and I am actually pushing to have a focal point at all ministries and departments. So the gender agenda is front forward on this. So I have been discussing it at a higher level. I've been discussing it with my permanent secretary and my minister. Hopefully we can get that ball rolling. We also revisited our gender policy in 2023. We are striving a little more for the presence of our marginalized group in our gender policy, our LGBTI community, also our sex workers, and obviously our other marginalized communities like persons with disability, persons who are emotionally, with emotional disabilities and so on. So we are trying our best right now to put those aspects of it which were not normally reflected in them, because each of these groups' needs are different. So our targeted interventions and policies for these specific groups are very important as to how we move forward as it relates to gender. And standard operating procedures is something that we're waiting for Parliament to give us a bit of feedback on, because we've drafted them and we've sent them to Parliament, so that within the Department of Social Services, which include the Bureau of Gender Affairs, our standard operating procedures for intimate partner violence and domestic violence is something that we are looking to implement, so that it makes it a lot easier that when people are transitioning, that we have everything in place to meet the needs of gender on all level. And then we are also working very, very hard, very strong on our referral pathways that need to be revisited. Is something that has been an issue, and we are trying our best to get them going. But we had a pretty interesting conversation yesterday with our UN partners, where we are. One of the things I think we are struggling with the Caribbean, and I think probably most of the small islands, that the general public still looks at gender from just a male and female perspective, inclusive of looking at probably the LGBTI community. But I think we need to break that status quo of gender being a specific to male and female, but just gender should be mainstream. I think it's time for gender is mainstream, so everybody gets a better picture of what you're trying to sell. And I keep using that example so many times in the recent weeks. You know, for example, at the hospital, when you go to a physician or gynecologist for, let's say, an intimate partner violence or sexual assault, that you go for the A&E department, that in planning, there should be specific doors that gives access to the police officers and the victims or survivors, where they don't have to be paraded in front of everybody going to a doctor. And I think until we start with the gender agenda in planning, where buildings for public service are developed and people can comfortably go and know that everybody's not going to see that they have an issue with the police, which may be sexual assault. We are trying to push those type of gender mainstreaming ideas into ministries, departments, and agenda and agencies. So I think with the little time that I've been here and what we've been doing, I'm just giving just a little reflection of where we're at and what we're doing in Dominica. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative from Dominica, from these also reflections. And now I would like, if I don't see any other representative from government, I would like to give the floor to Nana Oye Hayes Bain from the Caribbean Women in Leadership, CWIL. to make some comments after all this interesting discussion and presentation of reports, trends, and challenges. So if there is any other participant from the government who wants to speak, we're gonna move to listen to Nana.
Good morning. I am Patricia Hackett, representing the government of the British Virgin Islands.
Oh, go ahead, please. And you can open your camera too, so we can see you.
My camera, no, I can't open my camera. I'll try to see if I can do that while I speak.
Okay, yes, go ahead. We can hear you loud and clear.
I'm Patricia Hackett, Office of Gender Affairs in the British Virgin Islands, and we're located on Toratola. The Office of Gender Affairs falls under the Ministry of Health and Social Development. And I would just like to give some brief highlights with regards to gender equality. Maybe I should start off by saying that the British Virgin Islands is one of the overseas territories, and the UK signed on our behalf the CEDAW Convention in 1986. However, I would like to say that in 2023, the government of the British Virgin Islands launched a sustainable development strategy to achieve gender equality, among other things, by 2036. And I'm happy to say that it is in line with the 2030 agenda. Permit me to congratulate all my colleagues on the gender affairs in the different countries, and to congratulate UN for us meeting this far with regards to Beijing Platform for Action. And from listening to what others say and reading the reports, we have done a great deal in the Caribbean, but we still have a lot more to do. However, so I want to highlight that the Sustainable Development Goal 2030 is aligned with the British Virgin Islands Development Goal as well. And since then, we have added on climate change to the Ministry of Tourism and Culture. We also have the Department of Natural Resources. And I would also like to highlight that in order to mainstream gender across each sector, we have established gender focal points in collaboration with the public sector and statutory bodies. And to date, we have 55 gender focal points. So we have done quite a few capacity training with them to give them tips and strategies on how they can assist in highlighting gender inequalities in their sectors and ensure that we have gender mainstreaming. So we have developed a manual which gives a deep guidance or in-depth guidance on how they should move forward. I would also like to highlight that one of the areas that we looked at in terms of training is, well, let me say it another way. We have a program that we call Partnership for Peace, a Violence Intervention Program. It's a program in collaboration with the Magistrate C and UNIFEM, but which is now UN Women. We established this program with them in 2009, and to date, we have 160 men have benefited from this program. And so one of the objectives of this program is to let men know that violence is a choice, because gender-based violence is really increasing in the BVI, and we have completed 21 cycles, and we were about to start the 22nd cycle. And these referrals came through the magistrate courts when they commit common assault against their wives or children mother. They're charged, taken before the magistrate. And if she deemed that the case is not that serious and the person can do with some intervention, then they will refer them to this program. So in that area, I would say we're trying to eliminate it by doing the training with the men. In terms of politics, well, we only have two women. We have two women in politics, and the Office of Gender Affairs in the future plan to do a little campaign or training involving CIWIL to help our women to consider getting into politics in the BVI. So to date, we have 19 permanent secretaries, or 19 women who head departments like Attorney General, the Cabinet Secretary. We have like 5 permanent secretaries, women, of course. The Director of Social Security is a woman. And so I'm happy to report that the Speaker of the House is a woman, the Clerk of the House of Assembly is a woman. But we still need to have more women involved in politics and leadership positions. In terms of health,
Patricia, we can hear you. We are a little bit late, so...
Yes, so I just wanted to also point out that the Social Development Department provides grants assistance for vulnerable groups. And over the years, we have done quite a few. Of course, most of those grants that we give out to women. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. So I just wanted to let you know of some of those highlights and some of the things we achieved. We also have a social protection policy soon. And yeah, so we have some issues and some challenges with abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, and we're working on those. We have the Domestic Violence Act, which was launched in 2011, and we're planning to review it in collaboration with the Police Force and Department of Public Prosecution and the Attorney General. Okay, so I think that's all for now. I will provide further updates at the subsequent time. I know that we're running out of time.
Thank you very much, Representative Patricia Hacknett, representative from British Virgin Island. Now I would like to give the floor to Nana Oyeisbain from the CIWIL. She will have the challenge to make comments of all this interesting dialogue and intervention we have heard during this morning. She has 5 minutes, so Nana, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and all protocols observed. 5 minutes, I will try my best. Now, it gives me great pleasure to just share with you a few comments based on what we have heard and from the reports, some trends and emerging issues, including new approaches to accelerate progress of gender equality in our region. I must congratulate the governments, our international partners, and the other partner countries for supporting us to advance gender equality. It was a little bit disheartening to see that only 6 countries were able to submit reports. Now, this brings me to the point that we do, as a region, have under-resourced bureaus, not only monetary-wise, but in terms of human resource. So if this is an ongoing trend or that we are facing, definitely 30 years later after Beijing, we need to really address that. Now, in looking at the trends that were presented or that we've read about, I have about 6 trends that I want to highlight for your engagement. One is our economic participation and income disparity. Obviously, our labor force participation, when you look at the data across the region, does not necessarily reflect equality. We did hear about the gender pay gap. We did hear also about income inequality, where we look at in 2024, it was said that we had an average of 20 less men, you know, who are in terms of the pay, it's not as equal as it should be with our women in terms of the unemployment rate and in terms of the gender pay gap. So that needs to be looked at. And also when we look at our informal employment, obviously we have a significant number of our women in the informal sector, which lacks social protection. And so we need to see how best as government, civil society, and international organizations, we can work at that informal economy to see what can be done. Yes, our women have achieved in terms of education. However, as was said, we are not seeing that translation from education into the life of work and rolling up into leadership positions in the various sectors. We still do have sectors that are predominantly male dominated or female dominated. And I'll talk more about the health that even though you have certain sectors that are dominated by females, whenever the male enters into those sectors, they tend to shoot and go for their leadership positions. Now, when it comes to women in leadership as a region, we have seen some sort of progression. However, it is still not up to the level that we would like to see. And so the trend of low women in leadership still prevails in our region. When it comes to gender-based violence, yes, we've started documenting, we've increased in our reporting, but looking at gender-based violence from a holistic point of view, addressing the root issues, the family violence that prevails, doing what we can to mitigate the extreme femicides still remains an issue for us in the region. And of course, the invisibility of our marginalized groups. I'm talking about our indigenous populations. I'm talking about our LGBTQI plus populations, our persons with disabilities. That is definitely a trend that we need to see how best we need to address that. In other words, we need to make their issues more visible. We need to make sure that we clamp down on the discriminatory policies and laws that impede their progress and their advancement so that all our women in all their diversities and their various accolades can also be raised in terms of equality with the other groups that we have within our societies. Our data deficit. As a region, we have the lowest statistical performance of any region, and it actually is globally being compared to that of low-income countries. That is something we need to be concerned about. Our region, due to its vulnerability, still is very much under-resourced in terms of our debt. In other words, the way in which we are ranked in the world seems to be middle income, yet one hurricane can sweep a whole economy from 50, 60% performing well to zero. We need to see how best we can address some of those issues, because when that happens, a lot of our women suffer. So what are the emerging issues? The emerging issues, of course, is youth unemployment and inactivity. And so there was data that in Grenada, St. Lucia, and Jamaica, approximately 1 in 3 women are not engaged in education, employment, or training. We need to see how best we can look at that. Is it that the entrenched gender norms that are confined to women only to their domestic fears are more perpetuated. That is why we're seeing a lot of women in youth being unemployed, especially the women. Also, the informal employment that I spoke about, we need to see how we can address that. Educational attainment, how are we going to reverse the gender gap to make sure that the women that we're seeing in the education sector are equally reflected when it comes to the employment sector and also rising up to the leadership roles. When it comes to gender-based violence, are we doing our best to address the root causes, making sure that government, civil society, and international organizations are working together and not in silos, and that data collection on these issues are also harmonized nationally? When it comes to leadership, yes, women are still underrepresented when it comes to politics, although we have adopted this last year the General Recommendation 40 on equal representation. How are we going to implement that going forward? How are we going to put policies in place? Or are governments just only going to sign on to the recommendation and that is it? We need to hear more about the dialogues. We need to hear more about the plans and the strategies that we're going to be putting together to make this a reality, that we have equal representation in leadership as we have committed to with the pen, but also commit to not only verbally, but also financially. We need to look at climate change and its gendered impact. How are we as a society? Yes, we were able to hold the conversation on SIDS and develop the ABAS, but how are we now looking at resources, those commitments, to make sure that we follow not only what we see, but we also create a society where we can advocate and work together to address the gendered implications of climate change. The pushback on gender equality, that is a big emergent issue that we need to address. The rise of men bureaus. We need to look at what is happening to the women's movement, what is happening to women's rights issues. We have not reached where we need to be in terms of addressing those issues, yet we're facing pushback, we're facing the rise of men bureaus with very limited resources, that even the women's bureaus are not being effectively resourced to address those issues. We also need to look at the digital technology exclusion, the rise of AI, how our women and girls being positioned in a way so that they are equal in terms of being competitive, to use those resources and these new technologies to bridge the digital gap, especially in areas of STEAM, as we have spoken of. And also another emerging trend, which I want to bring to the attention of this group, is the use of civil society in national reporting, yet the lack of highlighting and also recognizing their work that they do. Now, some countries do, but some countries don't. And so we need to come together to realize that civil society plays a role in moving the needle forward for national recognition when it comes to gender equality issues. And so we need to work together to make sure that we work harmoniously, not only in advocating, but also resourcing and amplifying the voice of the work that is being done on the ground. So what are some of the new approaches to accelerate progress? I am calling upon gender-responsive economic policies, looking at how we address the pay gap, how we address care issues, how we're also looking at the technology and renewable energy and financing when it comes to high growth industries within our region. How are we going to be able to make sure that our male-dominated sectors are mainstreamed, that we have some sort of equality, and also eliminate the constraints that women face that men do not face when it comes to the life of work. We also need to strengthen our legal protections and law enforcement for gender equality to make sure that our justice systems are working closely with the various agencies, that cases within the court system do not stay so long before justice is given. We have to institutionalize prevention. We have to look at ways in which women in the region are fully engaged in the whole dialogue of women, peace, and security. Climate resilient gender strategies need to be enhanced across the board. We have to make sure that we strengthen activities to reinforce the institutions that work on climate change issues to ensure that gender is also part of the agenda. Closing the digital divide. I'm looking at my time, so I'm going to speed up here. We have to advance women's health. Now, it was interesting that the OAS, together with CWIL, as part of it, did a study in the region, and we found out that only 16 countries, only 18.7 women in our region hold ministry posts. And as I said, this is unacceptable when the health sector is predominantly female. Yet when it comes to addressing women's health issues at the highest level, women are not there. The emerging issue of mental health that needs to be addressed as well, including our reproductive health issues that continue to be a challenge. And so looking forward, I'm hoping that we can address some of the cultural and media biases that really regress the issue, regress the role that women play in our society. The positive messaging that needs to be put out, how we need to enhance AI, and how we also need to look at engaging our men and boys as allies to advance the work of gender equality in the region. And so I'll pause here. I know I went a little bit over the time, but I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to join in the dialogue. And if we do have time for question and answer, I am here to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this, for sharing with us your reflections. Now we would like to give the floor to Terry Hinz. She's representative from the CEDAW Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. Terry, you have the floor. You can also open your camera.
Great.
We can see you.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to join you all. Let me just adjust a little bit. So I am really honored to contribute to this conversation. It is a timely dialogue, and as a defender of human rights and women's rights, and the daughter of Trinidad and Tobago, so I want to extend my gratitude and appreciation to Maria Noel, Anna, Diane, Iswa, Nicole, and my colleague Nana. I don't want to repeat much of what was already said, so I'll try to avoid that. But I must pay homage to the many women in the Caribbean who participated in the fourth conference in Beijing and have contributed selflessly to securing gender equality in the Caribbean. We are fortunate to have some of these icons here in Trinidad and Tobago. And so I want to say a special shout out to, and thank you to Ms. Grace Talma, who always brings her wisdom forward and her experience, and she's always willing to share. So since the initiation of the Platform for Action, many girls have become women and many girls have been born with aspirations. Our work can help them realize in their lifetime. A lot has transpired in that time to shape and sharpen the focus on women and girls globally, making achievement for the Platform for Action increasingly urgent for those aspirations to become reality. Much has been accomplished, but so much more has to be done, and expeditiously. A scan of the international horizon reveals too many instances of women and girls being senselessly mutilated, raped, and murdered. Women and girls are used as pawns far too often in wars and rivalries, and access to healthcare, education, and the corridors of decision-making is still denied to too many women in too many parts of the world. So this current global landscape makes the Platform for Action even more of an imperative than it was in 1995. And we just heard about the backlash. That's just in addition to everything else that I've just pointed out. But in spite of these global challenges and setbacks, there have been notable strides made in our region and in Trinidad and Tobago. And this has been evidenced in the spheres of education, public administration, industry and commerce, and even in the political area, disaster preparedness and technology. And while equality is still at the aspirational level, a continued concerted effort can and will lead to real reality. There's strong evidence that the process is underway here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I would want to extend that to the Caribbean. And I think we just need to continue to keep the foot to the metal to make it happen. So the 4th Conference on Women in Beijing, held in Beijing in September of 1995, generated an ambitious response, and we call it the Platform for Action, and we identified the 12 key areas. But time has caught up with us, and the current and future generations cannot and will not accept documents filled with items or ideas of what should be done. Instead, they want action right now. So what progresses can we see have we seen in countries like Trinidad and Tobago? We've seen an increased awareness and commitment by government and civil society organizations and members of the public on a number of issues concerning women, particularly in the area of gender-based violence, women in decision-making. But I must stress and support what my colleague Nana has said. We are still struggling with language. When we say women, we must include women in all of our diversity. And that cannot be something that continues to be stricken from language when we are putting forth a document that represents our region. We have seen improvements in the number of women involved in the political arena, and in Trinidad and Tobago, on average, it's about 29%. There's 21% maybe in the House, 29% in the Senate, and in the local government, there is around 29%. So and that includes councillors and alderpersons and mayors. So we have seen that consistency. We have seen that improvement. We've also seen improvement in power and decision-making, particularly in public service. Among senior public servants, women make up the majority. And of course, in education and the examinations, coming out of primary school and entering high school, or coming out of high school, we've seen at the secondary school level, results show that 51% of girls and 49% of boys are graduating. And Trinidad and Tobago ranks 9th in 131 countries in the world in literacy levels. And more recently, we heard about it, more recently, we've seen the National Strategic Plan of Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Sexual Violence, which is an official evidence-based plan to eliminate gender-based violence and sexual violence within national community, prioritizing the safety of all citizens by fostering a multi-sectoral collaboration. And that was launched into 2024. And I stress that because multi-sectoral collaboration is so key to ensuring that these ideas, these aspirations become reality, that they're implemented in a sustainable way, and they're not just one-off programs that we continue to implement. So laws have been introduced and implemented concerning the age of marriage in Trinidad and Tobago, which referred to as the Marriage Act, the Violence Against Women, which is the Sexual Offences Act, a gender-based violence unit within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. I'm just highlighting 3 of a plethora of laws and policies that have been implemented. And I'll be remiss if I don't include the policy on sexual harassment in the workplace that has been reviewed by the Joint Select Committee in Parliament. However, there are still many challenges and obstacles. We must overcome these. And first, we have to acknowledge that the responsibility does not only lie with the government, it lies with all sectors of society. And there are still misconceptions about gender and the work being done by gender machineries. Violence against women has increased considerably, and countries must do more to prevent violence against women. Discrimination still exists against women in some situations, and particularly against women who are heads of household. And so the media needs to play a better role to address the standards used in portraying women. The issue of inequality and discrimination and nonviolence are all serious issues, and it affects all of our societies. Women and girls are disproportionately impacted, but men and boys are impacted as well. The limited financial and human resources of gender machineries contributes or exacerbates the problem. Resource mobilization strategies, such as the inclusion of in public sector and the private sector, is an area that needs to be better harnessed. We need more improvement in data collection. Even though we've seen marginal improvements, we need that to be sustainable. And there's still a need to develop sustainable programs to assist in the area of preventing violence, not just reacting to the violence that's happening. There's a need for greater monitoring and evaluation of the programs and the systems, and greater accountability for reporting on these programs and systems by the government to the general public. And the implementation gaps in existing legal and policy framework needs to be narrowed. So there's a need, finally, for the cabinet-approved gender policy that addresses social issues and adequately addresses policies and can update laws. Because while it's commendable that policies and programs are still being implemented without an overarching country gender policy, the fact is there is none. So there is no blueprint to follow, and we need to have that to guide, to ensure that what is being implemented is implemented in a way that is sustainable and that it's related and it's not one-off things that's being implemented. So a more informed approach to helping all citizens to understand the issues and how they can be involved as participants in the process so that they understand their roles and responsibilities. So let me emphasize as I close that time has caught up with us, and the current and future generations cannot and will not accept documents filled with ideas or items of what should be done. Instead, they want action, and they want actions that are built on each other to secure comprehensive results. They want all of the past commitments to be actionized today, yesterday actually, and because the 12 key areas have been amplified to include emerging issues such as climate change, technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and the heightened migration due to economic and social challenges, unnecessary wars, which, while they're not being fought on our shores, we are still being impacted by them, and they all exacerbate the previously named issues. So we have seen that we can achieve what we can achieve when all stakeholders come together in a meaningful engagement to address a specific issue, like ending violence against women and girls through the Spotlight Initiative Caribbean. It was not perfect, but we have some sustainable results coming out of it. Capacity strengthening at the institutional level, key to the implementation, was one outcome, along with the inclusion of civil society and women's organizations at the inception to bring critical knowledge to the decision-making process. We need to continue that. Civil society and women's organizations remain a committed stakeholder in the fulfillment of the commitment made 30 years ago in Beijing. And while many of us probably weren't alive then, certainly weren't in Beijing, we stand ready to roll up our sleeves and do what we can. So I want to take this opportunity to encourage the signing of the CEDAW optional protocol and the ECLAC agreement, and let us show our leadership ability and do what we do best. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Terry Hinz from the Committee of CEDAW in Trinidad and Tobago for your comments and reflections. Now I would like to give the floor for the closing remarks to Maria Noel Baeza, Regional Director of UN Women in Latin America and the Caribbean. Maria Noel, please, you have the floor.
Hi, Nicole. I am not seeing Maria Noel online. We've tried to reach her, but in the interest of time, perhaps what I suggest is I can go ahead.
Go ahead.
If that's
Thank
okay,
you.
because I know that we are pressed for time. Okay, so on behalf of Maria Noel, UN Women's Regional Director for the Americas and Caribbean, we really want to express our thanks to everyone that has participated in this very engaging and useful dialogue. Our representatives from government, from development partners, from civil society, without which we will not even have a Beijing Declaration to even deliberate upon. I want to especially thank the ECLAC team as well, and we really do hope that going forward we'll be able to continue the dialogue and, importantly, come together as a CARICOM, as a Caribbean, to reiterate our commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. That is why we are having these discussions. I want to also emphasize what many of you have said, that progress has been made, but we don't want to see a regression and a rollback on the commitments that have been made, and knowing that and understanding that each member state does have the right to have reservations, but we do need to understand and agree that we did make commitments as member states to you made commitments as member states to Beijing, and we are not renegotiating Beijing. This is basically an opportunity to come together to ensure that we push forward and that we leave no one behind. Despite the challenging geopolitical environment that we are seeing in pushback on gender equality and so on, that we really require a coalition of support from government, civil society, or donors, development partners to join us in this collective effort to ensure that women and men, boys and girls, everyone in all their diversity are able to enjoy the dividends of development and to essentially be able to enjoy the full range of their rights. Thank you so much, and on behalf of UN Women, I wish you a pleasant rest of your day, and we look forward to the continued partnership.
Thank you very much, Isiwa Ian. Now we're going to give the floor to Anna Westmes, the Director of the Division for Gender Affairs at ECLAC. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nicole. Could you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so we thank you for your participation in this dialogue. We had the participation of 10 countries, so this is very interesting for us and hear from you, and to have the voices of the Caribbean enrich our discussion and to learn more about the effort you are making to advance gender equality. Thank you also to Diane Warles and her team in the ECLAC Port of Spain office, Maria Noel and UN Women team, including Isiwa Iyagen from the multi-country office in the Caribbean, and of course the ECLAC team that has worked on organizing this meeting, including Nicole, Nicole Videgain, Diana Rodriguez, Daniela Maulén, Mauricio Almanza, Florencia Aguilera, Paula Gon, y Camila Bustos. No, I am very proud of your work to prepare this meeting together with UN Women. And let me take this opportunity again to express our solidarity with the Caribbean countries, nations that have recently faced natural disasters and other crises. No? These challenges underscore the urgent need for gender-responsive disaster management and resilient recovery efforts that prioritize the well-being of women and marginalized communities. No? Within the framework of the Beijing Plus 30, in synergy with the regional gender agenda, but also in compliance with the CEDAW Convention and the Belém do Pará Convention, the countries of the Latin American and the Caribbean have made significant progress towards achieving formal equality. However, substantive equality in practice in the fact remains an aspiration for the region. No? As we prepare for the CSW 69, I want to highlight that last year during the 66th meeting of the presiding officers of the Regional Conference on Women in Latin America and the Caribbean, delegates approved the declaration by the ministers and high-level authorities of the national machineries for the advancement of women in Latin America and the Caribbean that we will present to the CSW. The focus of which will be on the review of the Beijing, as you know very well. No? The declaration, the regional agenda is a strong voice from the region that we are taking to CSW 69, no? And we are a region that have this intergovernmental preparation in the framework of our regional conference, no? And in the declaration, the representatives recognize the gains and the lesson learned in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform of the national level in synergy, as I mentioned, with the regional agenda. And we talk about the structural and emerging challenges facing in the region. And we will have the declaration on the chat in order that you review the press release to close this meeting. No? I think another commitment that I would like to highlight and is part of our conversation today is accelerate as a matter of urgency efforts to overcome the four structural challenges of gender inequality, namely socioeconomic inequality and the persistence of poverty, discriminatory, violent, and patriarchal cultural patterns, and the predominance of a culture of privilege. Third is the sexual division of labor and the unfair social organization of care, and the concentration of power in the public sphere. Urgent and transformative measures are required to accelerate the effective implementation of this commitment. And today we have heard about different trends, challenges, emerging issues, advances, and new approaches, innovation. I think it's very important also hear from you innovation and new measures to move forward next year. No? The discussion today have underscored the unique realities of the Caribbean, while legislative reforms, institutional strengthening, gender-responsive policies, and also the barriers, no? Financial constraints, weak institutional capacity, lack of the disaggregated data, the impacts of climate change and disasters. So, and at the same time, we put in value the increased participation of women in politics and the expansion of gender-responsive policies in these areas also, no? In disaster management, care, violence against women and girls, and economic autonomy, no? So the region as a whole, Latin America and Caribbean region, are commitment to this transformative change, no? However, fully addressing these challenges requires, as we mentioned, as the Executive Secretary of ECLAC mentioned, requires urgent and coordinated efforts. strengthening, ensuring adequate funding, and deepening intersectoral collaboration will be crucial in the next year to closing gaps and advancing substantive equality. The road ahead requires strategic investment, strong political will, and continued collaboration and cooperation, Sur-Sur cooperation, South-South cooperation, and triangular cooperation among governments, civil society, and international organizations. This is a big challenge, and we need to move together. We need to move quickly and advance towards the care society. This is a main proposal from our region to the world, a society that cares for the planet, for the people, and self-care as a principle, ensuring the voices of the Caribbean women remain at the front. Finally, I want to mention that this year we will be having the 16th session of the Regional Conference on Women in Latin America and Caribbean. We are organizing that in coordination with UN Women and under the leadership of Mexico government, which will take place in Mexico in August. And in preparation for the conferences, we are organizing a Caribbean Academic Forum in Barbados, as well as a subregional preparatory meeting focused on the Caribbean to gather more data and substantive information to better reflect the situation in the subregion in our position documents and in the agreements that we will prepare together with the governments. So these events are being planned for the last week of March. You had the information, and we will have more details in the next week. But thank you once again for your engagement. And we look forward to continuing this important work together with the specificities of the Caribbean, but also as a whole, a region, Latin American and Caribbean, that have this important intergovernmental conference and regional agenda to move together to achieve the gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna Westman, Director of the Division for Gender Affairs in ECLAC. We acknowledge the Maria Noel Baeza from UN Women. It's online, so please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to listen to all of you. And I don't want to repeat what Anna very brilliantly said, and Isua as well. Only thing I want to say is it is important that you are in constant communication with your delegates at the UN. These 2 weeks are key for the negotiations of the wording of the declaration. It has started on Monday, and it will end by the end of next week. So whatever you want, really you want to be reflected, you have the draft, I imagine, otherwise we will make sure that you receive the draft. We receive comments in writing, we consolidate it, and we can send by the end of today the last version of the declaration that is being negotiated. But as you know, ministers of foreign affairs are always much more conservative than entities of gender. So it is important that you reach out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to your delegates in New York, and ensure that the Caribbean and Latin America are together in a progressive language to stop the backlash and to continue talking about women's rights and continue advancing women's rights. Don't forget that we are confronting a policy from the new administration of the US that is denying diversity, equality, and inclusion. So this is the right moment to find the right wording without leaving behind our principles. So it is extremely important that we preserve the principles of the Charter in Article 55 and CEDA Convention, which is our most important treaty, and also the Beijing Platform for Action that has 30 years. So thank you very much. And I am really looking forward to see you all during the Regional Conference of Women in Mexico, and of course in New York, those who go to the CSW. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Manuel Baeza, from your remarks. I don't know, Diane Quarles, if you also want to take the floor for the closing.
Just to say what a wonderful experience this has been for this exchange, to hear the contributions of all the delegations. And I just want to emphasize the point that has just been made by Maria Noel. It is so important for the countries at headquarters to ensure that they're on the same page with the voice of their delegations in New York. And so as we prepare for this very important meeting in 3 weeks' time, for there to be that engagement. But I want to join in thanking Anna and the fantastic team in Santiago, Sua and Maria Noel, and the team in UN Women, and of course, my own team here. Wonderful to hear from Terry and Nana and all the representatives. I think this has been a truly rich exchange. I certainly have enjoyed listening to the contributions, and we look forward. Well, we have CSW 69 coming up, and then we also have the academic meeting that Anna mentioned at the end of March, before we get to our regional conference in August. So there is a lot for us to engage on going forward during this year. Look forward to participating with all of you on this. So thank you very much. Thanks again, Nicole, for being our mistress of ceremonies. It was a wonderful morning, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you very much. The recording of the meeting will be available in the ECLAC website. So we're going to continue to disseminate all this information and reflections. Thank you. Have a good day.